That charming Alameda home might have beautiful floors, a nice kitchen, and fresh paint, but behind the walls, well, that's another story. There could be some serious problems. I'm Jake Coyne, Bay Area real estate agent and house flipper, and I work with buyers and sellers every single day here in the East Bay Area. And my partner Mike and I have sold over $100 million worth of residential real estate here in the East Bay. So over the years, we've learned a thing or two about identifying red flags in properties that cause you issues down the line. And in this video, I want to share with you the 5 red flags that I warn all my buyers about. So if you're curious about finding the right property and avoiding the wrong one, then watch the whole video and you'll be sure to be on your way. All right, now let's get on with the video. So red flag number 1 is unpermitted additions. Alameda homes often have bonus spaces, a converted garage, basement, attic, extra bathroom, whatever it may be. Now, the first thing I do when one of my buyers is interested in a property is look on the property tax records. This is going to lay out the historical data of the home, but also lay out the facts and the specs of the home. Bed, bath, square footage of the property. Now, if any of this is differing from the advertised specs that's on the MLS, well, then we have to ask why that is. And we'll go to the seller. If they failed to disclose something, well, then maybe they didn't know about it, or maybe, they're trying to hide something that we've got to dig deeper on. If they didn't know about it and they purchased the property already with maybe some unpermitted work, then we've got to determine how much of a risk this poses. Sometimes it's completely harmless, but let's talk about how this can cause harm in the future. Let's say someone rats on you and somehow the city finds out and you get red tagged. Well, the city is going to come in and demand to see what you did and if it's up to code or not. This means opening up walls, etc. Now, if you want to get this unpermitted work permitted, well, then we've got to determine if these spaces are actually conforming, such as if you convert a basement or an attic, but the height doesn't meet the minimum requirement, well, then that's a big no-no. And the city is going to make you do one of 2 things: rip it out entirely or make it conforming legal limit height. So that means raising your height or lowering the floors if you're in the basement in order to meet that height requirement. It's not always likely you're going to get grandfathered in. I would expect the worst on that. Again, all of this stuff adds a lot more cost to you. Now, even if you are able to happily live with your unpermitted work and nothing happens, which a lot of homes in Alameda do, so it's a very good chance you will be able to. If you decide and want to renovate anything in the future or add a second story or build out, if your existing floor plan differs from what the city has listed, well, then they're going to ask, what's this discrepancy about? And then they're going to, again, make you get this stuff permitted or demand to see architectural blueprints and or engineering calculations in order to support any of the changes that you made, which is, again, another hefty cost for you. Now, one other thing that's important to think about is the financeability of the home to your lender. Not every lender is going to value non-permitted spaces, okay? Because they're lending on something that might not be insurable. And so even though the value might hold in the marketplace to buyers because space is so limited here in Alameda, it might not be valuable per se to your lender, which is unfortunate. But these are things you got to think about, and this is where the appraisal comes in and potentially having that appraisal contingency in there. So I've had clients fall in love with gorgeous garage conversions, but we always stop to talk about what that means on paper for you as a buyer and for future resale value. Red flag number 2. Are you feeling sloped floors in your home? Well, that might just be the charm of having old vintage hardwood floors, as unfortunately they do tend to warp over time. Or it might mean something more, such as a subfloor damage, failing foundation, or settlement issues. Now, a majority of Alameda homes were built in the early 1900s, some even 1800s, and they sit on unreinforced concrete. So that means no rebar, and they're likely vulnerable more so now than previously as time has gone on to seismic activity. If you intend to do any remodeling or expansion of your property in the future, the city is going to require you to seismically retrofit your property up to code. I've learned this from my own projects, and I've had to do entire foundations because of this. So you might notice that sometimes these older foundations, well, they get crumbly because they've got no rebar in them. And it makes it hard for anchor bolts to be drilled into them and have, good support. And so what that would mean is ripping out the entire foundation and remaking it anew with the proper rebar. And that's going to be a 6-figure, potentially, endeavor, capital expense for you. So even if these foundations have stood the test of time through multiple earthquakes over 100 years, eventually something is going to need to be done about it. Homes in Alameda sell with brick foundations all the time, and they are sturdy and still in good shape. But again, if you want to expand your property or if you need to retrofit it, it can certainly mean more expense for you. And it's going to be our job to bring the expert in there and really determine what can be salvaged, what needs to actually be repaired or retrofitted in order to make this house extremely safe for you and your family. And how long can you actually go without having to do anything, if possible. So it's very important to think about all of this stuff because it just takes one earthquake, right, in order to cause a catastrophe. And we want to avoid that at all times. And if it's not a foundation issue, well, then we have to think, is this a settlement issue or soil issue? And what are the countermeasures in order to prevent any further sloping or damage to the rest of the home? If it's just a subfloor issue, well, that's a much easier fix. But if you've got those vintage hardwood floors, well, it can be costly if we've got to rip those up and relay them down. A lot of these older Alameda homes, well, they get a premium because of that vintage charm. And wood floors are not cheap, let me tell you. But again, we'll do the necessary due diligence to figure all of this out for you. Red flag number 3 is cheap cosmetic flips with old systems. Now, if a home looks amazing online in the photos, but it kind of feels off in person, it usually is. Loose hardware, soft floors, uneven finishes, and paint splatter where they shouldn't be. Well, these are the signs of a rushed flip. And what's even worse is that if the roof, the HVAC system, the water heater are all 20 plus years old or in the near end of its lifespan, then you have to really ask if these flippers have been cutting corners, especially if they have a tight profit margin. They want it to look good, not live good. And this doesn't mean every house flipper. I'm a house flipper myself, but a lot of them are profit hungry and they don't necessarily care what happens after they sell the home. I'm a Bay Area real estate agent, but I've started flipping houses recently and I've got a reputation to uphold. But I also know what buyers want. If you invest in a quality product, buyers will eat it up because they'll see that quality of work. And what I've learned is that sometimes the most important things in a house is the stuff you can't see. So you really got to be careful with purchasing rushed flip jobs because that's going to mean you might pay a premium for the aesthetic because not everyone's also always looking about what's behind the walls, but that means you're also going to pay a lot more for maintenance costs down the line. Red flag number 4 is pest damage without stucco test holes. Now, if you're a buyer thinking about purchasing a home that's got a stucco exterior, which a lot of them do here in Alameda, well, termite and dry rot issues can often hide beneath the surface. So if you see a pest report and it mentions damage, pest damage throughout the property, like dry rot, etc., mold, but they didn't perform any test holes, well, then that's a red flag. Now, if you don't know, a stucco test hole is holes drilled into the side of the exterior so that they can see behind the stucco and determine if the framing has been damaged underneath the stucco. And so what's even worse is that if they did perform stucco test on one wall and they have found issues and there is pest damage surrounding the exterior on other parts of the property, but they didn't perform the test holes on other walls of the home, well, it's certainly a clue that there may be more going on. So stucco can hide a lot of the damage. And if that damage gets discovered after you close on the property, well, unfortunately, you're the one paying for it. So it's highly important, even in that competitive situation, to do a thorough investigation. And I'll be the one to help you lead that conversation. So red flag number 5 is vague or missing seller disclosures. Now, this one's sneaky. If the seller has lived there for multiple years, 5 or more years or so, but their disclosures are empty, no mention of repairs, neighbors, or issues, well, to me, that's a red flag. Sellers in California are required to disclose what they know, and there's a whole package that lists out questions asking them highly specifically what they know. If they mark no or I don't know on everything, well, that doesn't mean the home is perfect. That might mean they're protecting themselves and their property instead of being highly transparent to you. I've learned in the past that once you move in, everything that you're trying to hide will eventually be known. So it's important for you as a seller to disclose everything up front because it will come back to bite you. Now, I'll be honest, this isn't always the case for every seller. They might not actually know or might not have any important information to share with you. And there's not, one notable fact that they can share that might make you potentially not want the property. Well, you got to really ask yourself if they're hiding something. So here's what I recommend. I would recommend that you walk the neighborhood multiple times before you eventually write that offer, especially if you've got a few weeks before the offer date. That might even mean knocking on some of the doors or talking to the neighbors that are out on the street. I guarantee you the neighbors will tell you everything you need to know. You can ask neighbors if there's been any floods in the basements, foundation work, even in their properties, because that might tell you something about the property you're offering on, especially if they're in such a close vicinity. And this comes down to even the noise complaints. Has there been any disruptions, loud dogs, etc.? I guarantee you they'll share everything. So it's not weird. You're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions of dollars into these properties. It's your right to have clarity. So it's important to remember that these red flags don't always mean it's a bad deal, but it does mean we need to ask the right questions. A good agent protects you not just with knowledge, but with strategy. So if you're thinking about buying or selling here in the Bay Area, well, feel free to reach out to me. We work with people every single day, just like you, help buy and sell properties, and we would love to help you make your move. I'm Jake Coyne, Bay Area real estate agent. If you enjoyed this video, again, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I love making this educational content for you, and I hope to see you around the city soon, and I would hope to work with you in making your next move. All right, take care.